The world at large are really getting to see what this Duchess Doolittle's all about, aren't they, my dears? Nonsense on stilts! On stilts! That's exactly what she and her hubby are all about. Old Harry Krishna. Before we get on to that, I'm going to give out some notes on the Bower book. I've read it. That's several hours of my life I'll never get back. But some of you wanted to hear my review. It's not a review, but I've got a few notes that I'll offer you. I'll leave that for the last thing in this video. But I read it. Every single hunch that I had about that book has proved to be correct, pros and cons. So I'll offer my view. But first of all, yes, this Samantha business. You know, the whole world is getting to see. You know, even if she wins every single court case about that's going on about her, because let's face it, she's got a knack for winning these things, hasn't she? You can't put it past the gal. This hustler, this fiction bustler, you cannot put it past her, can you, girl? Victory after victory after triumph, triumph, triumph. But, oh shit, every time I buy a new pair of earrings, and these are another find from old second-hand Susie, my dear, she pulls them out of the bag for me. One's always loose and falls off, or maybe I've just got one fat earlobe and one thin lobe. I don't know, my dear, but they keep dropping like fruits from the tree. Where was I? Oh yeah, Markle. She's got a knack for these victories, but guess what? Every time she does, we still get to see the undercurrent of what's going on with she and her husband. We still get to see her truth, their truth versus the truth, and that's exactly what's happened again in this example. As you know, Samantha is seeking damages of $75,000, sought over the disparagements that Meghan made in the Oprah interview, but also finding freedom. I've got to say, I think Samantha Markle is reaching if she wants to include finding freedom in that. Yes, we absolutely know without a doubt that Markle cooperated, that she shipped off her list of notes and Meghan's alternative facts, shall we say. Sent them off for Scobie and Durand, we know that. But I think, by and large, they were left to their own devices to concoct the rest. Write the rest of that tome, which I will confess I've never read. But nevertheless, Samantha objected to Meghan's description on Oprah that she grew up as an only child. The poor child of the Sizzler. According to Meghan, well, Samantha's objected to that. I don't think that's the most scandalous thing that she could object to, but that's one of her complaints. But Meghan's lawyers chipped in and said that this description cannot be false of being an only child because it is a textbook example of a subjective statement about how a person feels about her childhood. Well, listen, my love, you know, we can all take a bit of poetic license, but we know that there's a time and a place for that, and a courtroom is not one of those places, and moreover, a definitive interview where you are trying to make the world aware of the darkness of an institution and the institutional racism within that institution. Oh, for shit's sake. I'm going to have to give up with these clip-ons, my dear. That's about the 20th time they've fallen off. I'm thinking about getting my ears pierced. But, you know, in a situation with the gravitas and the seriousness, supposed seriousness, of the Oprah interview, you've got to offer facts out there, because once we start hearing that this is your subjective feelings of how you feel, how are we supposed to take the rest of what you say seriously? So this is rather delicious for all of us, I think, because it's just more and more evidence on top of evidence. How she spins, you know, how they both spin their yarns and how they see the world through their oh-so-objective, subjective and dangerous lens. Freddie Gray in The Spectator said the Duke and Duchess often deploy this torturous sub-Freudian lingo as if not really written for public consumption, let alone clarity, but for two pairs of eyes in particular. Harry and Meghan's apparent addiction to therapy talk as an outlet for self-pity overwhelms everything, including, it seems, even the notion of such a thing as truth. I'm so sorry, but they're becoming a laughingstock. I know there are tens of thousands of supporters of them, but most of those supporters, in my mind, are under the same deluded sort of Fruit Loopish atmosphere that those two live in. They are part of these generations that are coming up and being told that feelings are much more important than facts, my dear. Feelings over facts. And some have been comparing the plight of Markle and Harry to some extent, to the curious case of Rachel, what was her name? Dolezal. You know that gal told everyone she was black? She was white as snow. Told everyone she was black and of Native American descent, and she became the head of the local branch of the National Association for Advancement of Coloured People, the most prestigious black rights organisation in the United States, so they say. Well, she was white. She was white, but she insisted when she was exposed, she insisted the biological facts of her birth and parentage were irrelevant. Her essential essence, she said, was black. This was her truth. So that is the kind of age that we are now living in, and that is the dangerous sort of age that these two are ushering in with speed and joy and thrill, with these constant invitations, whether it's via Better Up or one of their cringeworthy speeches that are just dripping in confections and icing sugar. It is just this constant encouragement, especially to the vulnerable and the young ones coming up, I feel. Especially to them, to create your own reality, to have your own vision and be who you want to be, not who you are, and say what you personally experience and feel, not the truth. And it is so utterly dangerous and damaging to society, particularly at this time and place, the Western societies, because other societies are looking on with bemusement, amusement, and, quite rightly, really. I mean, good for them, those who are our enemies out there. Good for them keeping their heads screwed on. They're just looking at Western societies and these ridiculous narratives, and they are just laughing their tits off, my dears, thinking, oh, well, we don't have to try and usurp them with our sinister undercurrents and plots and plans to overthrow you at some point in the not too distant, because you're doing it for yourselves, my dear. Pop will eat itself, and popular culture seems to be gnawing away at its own backbone. It is absolutely over-the-top distressing to watch. Sad, willful destruction of our own peoples by the likes of these two that prefer feelings over facts. A comment here regarding titles. SD says, beginning to dislike this imbecile intently. He is entitled, dim and ignorant. Please remove his titles before it is too late. You asking me, dear? Well, I know I'm a bit of a queen, but unfortunately I don't have jurisdiction. But you know what? I would do it for you, my dear. He and Megs are on a mission to destroy the monarchy. Agreed. They can't be king and queen, so they're going to try and ruin it for anybody that can. Namely, Charles and Camsey, and Catherine and Big Willie. He doesn't realise it will destroy him too. Well, when it comes to titles, I'm the first to... I've got no comprehensive insight, my dear, into the jurisdictions, the laws of this, that and the others. I've heard many people's opinion on this. I've listened to authoritative figures, some who claim that the title can be stripped, for want of a better word, some who claim that it can't. The general consensus, what I seem to know, and you can, of course, comment and let me know your findings, but what I believe is that the Royal Highness title, the HRH, that can be stripped, for want of a better word, by the monarch of the day. I think we all know that that is not going to be the way that Her Majesty wants to end her reign, which has already been tarnished by Harry and Meghan in the most vulgar way, and the really the most upsetting way. It is a testament to her good humour that she, can rise above it, have a chuckle of it, and even invite them for a cup of tea, and probably not mention the whole affair. It is just a testament to her character. Possibly in a bad way, but my mind doesn't want to go there. No, in a good way. Let's stick with in a good way. No, I mean, she's 96 old, my dear. She's got to focus her energy on actually getting through the day, let's face it. Come on. 86 maybe, 76 maybe, I would have expected her to put her foot down a bit more, but at 96, she just needs to try and smooth the way for Charles and Camilla as much as she can. But, I think we understand she's not going to be going around stripping titles, especially when there's so much pressure on her to strip Andrew of his HRH at this current time. But to my knowledge, she can do that, but to strip a dukedom from somebody requires an act of parliament. And of course, I'd heard this before, I didn't know much detail about it. I must confess to you, as controversial as it is, I want those titles taken. By fair means or foul, I don't care. I don't want them to possess HRH. He was born a prince, he will die a prince. That's died in the will. But the title, the royal title, can be stripped, and so can the dukedom. There's got to be a way. The thing is, I know it's a Pandora's box, because once you start putting those kinds of acts into works, then it could set a dangerous precedent where the royal family in this cancel culture age are continually asked to strip people of their titles all the time when they do something wrong. So I do understand that there is a danger, but they need to come up with something. I think what they should do, if they were to bring a new act into power that involves the stripping of the titles, and we'll talk about it in that moment, because there are attempts to create a new bill or a new act. What I think should be done is that it should involve, if a member of the royal family or an HRH moves overseas to a non-Commonwealth territory, that is when the rights should be there for them to be stripped. Don't you think that's a wonderful compromise and a wonderful plan? This is my plan. But if the royal family want to err on the side of caution and not bring in some kind of act which enables them to strip titles, because they're worried that it means that people like Andrew can be stripped of titles, anyone down the line, from William to Anne to God knows who else, to Beatrice, anyone else, why don't they just concoct some kind of plan where if you move overseas to a non-Commonwealth realm, that is when it puts those titles in peril? Because as you can see, and as we're going to see from the memoir, it's a scandal. On the front of that memoir, I don't know, it might say, by Harry Mountbatten Windsor. Might do, I don't want to judge him before it's even in print, but what do you bet that it might say? Harry, the Duke of Sussex. I think that's rather more likely, but I refuse to criticise him for that because I haven't seen how it's going to be presented. But either way, he's still in the HRH, he still carries that dukedom as the wife, and I think that offers a remedy for this trouble. And I also think it's a rather rational one. But the Act of Parliament that most people refer to when they say use the Act of Parliament to strip them of the dukedom of Sussex, which was granted and gifted to them by the Queen on Harry's marriage. So it was a wedding gift that sadly really can't be revoked without an Act of Parliament. Most people, I believe, and forgive me if I'm wrong, but they're referring to the Titles and Deprivation Act of 1917. Now, I found this on the petitions website from the UK government and Parliament. Some of you might be aware of it, but some time ago there was a petition requesting a debate in Parliament to consider utilising the Titles and Deprivation Act of 1917 to strip the Sussex dukedom from the couple due to the immense damage their behaviour since the marriage in 2018 and their abandonment of the royal family has done to the reputation of the monarchy. And they said that having been funded to the tune of millions by the British taxpayer, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex have sought since January 20 to monetise their royal titles in the USA. Their blatant disregard for Her Majesty is evident to the entire nation. Their use of their titles to obtain pecuniary advantage in the USA is an embarrassment to the royal family and to the UK and the Duchess's foray into the US political arena. It sets a dangerous precedent while her title is still being used there. Well, this petition was rejected. And why? Well, apparently it's about honours or appointments. We can't publish petitions about honours and appointments, including asking for people to be given or have titles removed. In any case, the use of royal titles are a matter for Her Majesty the Queen, and not government or Parliament. And you might be interested to know, they say, that the Titles Deprivation Act of 1917 was actually specifically for use during the First World War, and for those who have, during the present war, borne arms against His Majesty or his allies, or who have adhered to His Majesty's enemies, and not for a general removal of titles. So, forgive me if you already know this, or if there's more to the story. This is just from 5 minutes Googling that I did today. But this act was specifically put into place for these effects in the war, but they seem to suggest that all other decisions go back to Her Majesty. However, in the wake of the Andrews scandal, where people have recently been calling for him to be stripped of his dukedom, but seemingly find no way of doing so, there has been a request for a new bill, sponsored by a Labour MP by the look of it, Rachel Maskell, a bill to give the monarch powers to remove titles, to provide that such removals can be done by the monarch on their own initiative or following a recommendation of a joint committee of Parliament and for connected purposes. And it's gotten to the second reading. As you can see, there's a million stages. It goes through the House of Commons, then the House of Lords, and then the final stages before it acquires royal assent. So it's only in the very beginning stages might be turfed out. And that might be for the better if it's turfed out, because as we've already discussed, it could be set a very dangerous precedent. Because people will be baying for blood all the time from members of the royal family. But the next stage for this bill, the second reading, is scheduled to take place on the 9th of December. At the moment, no such mechanism exists for royal titles to be removed in such a way. And some of the press coverage said that this bill will work by tackling a deficiency in the law and enabling titles to be removed. And I thought it was a good time to raise this issue of the titles, because I will say that that was one of the overriding feelings that I had after reading the Bower book. Having a compendium and an aggregate of all these goings on over the last few years in one tome and reading it in virtually one sitting, absolutely, you know what I will say for it, it absolutely left me thinking to myself, those titles need to go. Those titles need to go. And if Elizabeth won't do it, fingers crossed Charles will, because I think that they need to be made an example of. So yeah, just a handful of notes on the Bower book to offer, and nothing profound, because there's nothing really that profound in the book to discuss. I noticed that it received very poor reviews online, even from publications that you would expect to raise it up, including The Times, who serialised it. They gave it a very poor review, as did The Telegraph, who gave it 2 stars. I very much agreed with everything they said in their review. That seems to echo my thoughts on it. I guess I'd give it about a 2-star if I had to mark it in that way. And The Telegraph are, I would say, have a bias towards the royal family, and you know, I think they're always fair and even-handed, which is why I like them, but their readership certainly like the royal family and dislike the Harkles more than many other publications. So they weren't biased. They said if they were going to be biased one way, it would be to be in favour of the book, but they thought it was awful, as did The Guardian, as did every major review that I've seen. Thought that it was biased, and thought that it wasn't particularly illuminating. Now, I will give it some praise and criticism. My main criticism of the book, and everything that I told you in advance of the book, every hunch I had when I seemed dismissive of it, was absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. I didn't get one thing wrong, and everything that I said I thought that it might offer was also correct. Because it offered a compendium, an aggregate of everything that we already know. I would say 99% of this 500 pages or whatever it was. It was a real slog getting through it, I have to say, because it was like, okay, I know this, I've read this. 99% of it was rehashed articles, interviews, everything we've already heard from Thomas and Samantha, with a few little other tidbits thrown in. Loads and loads of quotes from, you know, it was a collection of TV interviews of Diary of Princess Diary of Princess Pushy. That's the Samantha Markle book. Finding Freedom, the Brother book, the book written about Harry and William, Battle of Brothers. It's very useful as a compendium of collecting all of that together. That's what 99% of it is, and then there's 1% where you'll get a few new insights into conversations, like the Vanity Fair one, like the Sam Kashner one, which, as I said last time, and I stick by, even though Mr. Bower rebutted Sam Kashner's rebuttal, I'm sure that Mr. Bower has all the accurate quotes checked off But we can tell, especially as you go through the book and read more and more of it, that there is a certain picture that he wants to paint. So certain conversations aren't, by the omittance of other parts of the conversations, they don't offer the absolute truth. It's another version of his truth against the truth. So we got to see his bias more and more as the book went on. Actually, the last few chapters, especially involving the Jubilee, seemed so hurriedly written. Well, you could tell they were, because he completed it in June, didn't he, shortly after the Jubilee. So you could tell that the last few chapters were very rushed and there wasn't much to them. And actually there were quite a few typos throughout the entire thing. Words missing, apostrophes in the wrong place, which I don't care for. I think if you're going to employ a proofreader, they should do their job, and you shouldn't pay them even if they miss one apostrophe. One of the typos was actually quite careless, especially if an outsider who doesn't know much about the story was reading it. By the way, I read it on a tablet. I didn't buy the physical hardback edition, so your copy might be different to mine. But on the tablet version, it said they inserted Meghan's name instead of Gayle King at one point, and it said that Oprah said about Meghan, "Meghan is the mother I never had, the sister everybody would want. She is the friend everybody deserves. I don't know a better person." Now, of course, I knew she was talking about Gayle in that instance. She said it on TV, and I'd heard that before. But for other people, I scratched my head first of all. I thought, what? She said raving about Meghan in such a way? No, it was about Gayle. So I'm sorry, but these are rookie mistakes. Come on, publishers, pull your finger out. But seeing as he did go down the route of total disparagement, he could have made it a bit more deliciously bitchy. There were a couple of asides that made me giggle, but only one or two, and I was hoping for a bit more. I know he's capable of more. So that was a bit of a disappointment. But my main criticism remains that even to this day, he still claims that it is full of explosive revelations. I'm sorry. Don't tell me that it was explosive. Don't tell me there was anything in there that most of us didn't already know. Unless you want to get really, really geeky about it with a few things. The power of it, if there is power of it, is putting it all together so that everyone can see it as a Big Mac, if you like, with all the ingredients in there together. And as I said, it left me when I closed it. I felt deflated because it was a rather unchallenging read. It was bland. It didn't offer anything new, but it certainly did solidify in my mind that I want those titles taken away from them, and it sort of illustrates their modus operandi, which is very useful. I'm not going to take that away. It's a competently written book. It's a fine read for a lazy day or something. It might please, well, it will please many of you. Some of you told me that you think it's absolutely fantastic and you love it, and that's wonderful. But everybody has different standards. Everybody's mind feels nourished by different things, and that's fair enough. I totally accept that. But absolute props to Mr. Bauer. It was a genius of marketing, a genius of the hype machine, especially with YouTube, which I think was particularly helpful for everybody. You were all rushing out and buying it in your tens of thousands before we'd heard anything about it. So many of you told me that it was going to expose surrogacies, evil events that she got up to as a child. There was not one single mention, was there? One single mention of any of those conspiracy theories. And if you're going to tell me it's because they're afraid of being sued, well, if it was true, it would have been put in there, wasn't it? And I'm sure people will say, well, they're a little, he refers to the child as Harry's child and not Meghan and Harry's. I'm sorry, I don't want innuendo in a book. I don't want cheeky little private jokes between author and reader. I want meat, some meat on the bone. If you've got something to say it. It was not explosive. No, it was not explosive, Mr. Bauer. I'm sorry. But it was genius merchandising, so I applaud you for that, my dear. I truly do. No shade to Mr. Bauer in that respect. And one thing I've noticed about Mr. Bauer when he's on telly, he insists on calling Oprah Winfrey Opera. And he insists on calling Doria... I say Doria, don't I? Doria. He mispronounces it. And I do it in my broadcast, my dear, because I find it entertaining, I throw in a bit of parody and a few laughs and giggles, so... I'm not being a hypocrite, but I know that Oprah is pronounced Oprah, as do most people. Who's going to call her opera? Or Doria? He's heard Mr. Markle call her Doria all the time. Doria, Doria, Doria. I mean, it comes across as very pompous, I'm afraid. I know that Oprah's original name was Orpah, wasn't it, from the Bible? But she became known as Oprah. They started calling her Oprah. But I remember my great-grandmother used to call her Opera. But I think that was just because she used to read the name in the papers rather than watch her on the television. But come on, I mean, Mr. Bauer knows what's going on in the world. But I did find all the alluding to Doria's weed smoking rather funny. I didn't realise quite how much, apparently, allegedly, that she puffed away on the old weed. But much of the episodes that he describes are really reaching to try and paint Meghan in a bad light. You know, when he speaks about their childhood and she's out in the garden playing with her ex-friend, Nikki Priddy. Apparently, she refused to play with the bunch of insects that Nikki Priddy brought to her to play with. She refused, and they spent the rest of the afternoon with their backs to each other in the garden playing with different activities. And you know, he tries to make it seem as if Meghan was just, you know, she was being really rather haughty about that. No, take your insects away. And she turned her back on her. But I'm sorry, I think that paints Meghan in a rather nice light, that she didn't want to inflict misery on a bunch of poor insects that Nikki Priddy had brought up to her. What she wanted to do, cut up worms into little bits and bobs, or pull the wings off little flies. I'm sorry, I think that just showed Meghan's humane side, I'm afraid, to me. So things like that were reaching. I've never been a fan of the Markle children, as you know, Samantha and Thomas, and what I did appreciate is that their part as the ragtag family was painted really rather fairly. I didn't know some of the mischief that Thomas Markle had got up to, Thomas Markle Jr. I missed some of this. I might have read about it at the time, but I didn't know that lottery win of Mr. Markle's was a complete fiction, invented by Thomas Markle Jr. for money. That California state lottery win. Apparently none of that was true. It was done to extract payment from an eager journalist. You know, this book certainly painted the dark side of Meghan, and lots of it I agree with, but it also illuminated exactly why she has isolated herself from that ragtag family. I don't blame her one bit. They are all absolutely awful. What I do blame her for is for persuading Harry to treat his family in the same way, because they are not the Markles and they did not act in the same way, even though they're not perfect. I certainly got the impression that the tide turned with Thomas Markle Sr. the moment she achieved success with Suits, really. You know, he seemed not to be able to handle her, getting the upper hand over finances. And I got the impression that he was very uncomfortable with her success. I feel he wanted to retain his importance in her life. And this is only my hunch, but is the general impression I get when I see him interviewed, the irritability, the impatience. I do get the impression that he's a control freak, like Meghan, and like Harry. So it's a perfect storm between the three of them. You know, these three sort of control freaks, the dynamics between them aren't really desirable, are they? One of the positive effects of the book is that it very much brings into view the way that she exaggerates, believes and hypes herself and her spin. Exactly what we've seen in the headlines this week with the Samantha court case. You know, she's in love with her story. She seems to be a romantic. She's in this romantic love affair with herself. And everything is a poem. Everything is this story. It's this journey. It's a poem. It's, you know, I've written life is a movie to her. You know, life is a movie and she is the star and everything else is just subject to that story. I also see that apart from Thomas Markle Jr.'s ex-wife selling photos of Meghan, also Thomas Markle Jr. sold his father's address, according to Mr. Bauer, to a journalist because nobody could get hold of Thomas Markle Sr.'s address. Thomas Markle Jr. sold it. Now, whether he did that with permission of the father, I mean, that could be another twist of the tale, I don't know. But sold his address. I mean, I ask you, if they got no scruples whatsoever, you know, I get, you know, if they want to merch the system they don't like and make some money out of it, there are ways to do it without resorting to this kind of unscrupulous activity. I very much got the feeling that Thomas Sr. is jealous of Harry. He's jealous of Harry. He doesn't like Harry being the number one guy in Meghan's life as far as I'm concerned. And I must say, I believe Harry's desperate texts to Thomas Markle that they were exasperated trying to communicate with him during the time before the wedding, because I can imagine and can see that that man is absolutely impossible to deal with. There's a sentence towards the end of the book which said, Meghan's good fortune is that she does not appear to suffer a bad conscience for the hurt she caused the Queen and her family, nor the disappointment to millions of Britons. She retains the power to damage the institution to which they have been compelled by birth to dedicate their lives. And I found that very poignant and very true. She's unconscionable because she has no conscience. It doesn't seem to play on her mind at all what she's put that family through. What she's put Britain through, who love the monarch of 70 years. It's atrocious behaviour from she and Harry. Absolutely atrocious. There's no obvious insinuation that anyone other than Meghan carried her own child, because one of the chapters says Meghan's original plan was to have a home birth helped by her mother. So unless he means they were waiting to invite a surrogate into their own home and for Doria to chaperone her through the birth in some kind of birthing pool, which he isn't insinuating that, then it's clear that he believes that Meghan is the mother. We also hear about the time, and remember that Mr. Bauer interviewed Thomas Markle for 2 days in Mexico, and I think he was actually really rather fair about Mr. Markle, so I will absolutely give him that. It wasn't some kind of puff piece about Mr. Markle, that's for sure. I think it was quite fair. And he mentioned the time when Thomas Markle was furious that Meghan had claimed to have sent him some money, and he said on television, I think, I've never taken a penny from Meghan. And this was a mistake because, in fact, Meghan had given him at least $20,000 at this time. And we hear that there were, a few times, I think, when she sent a few bucks his way. She also seemed to offer him a lot of hotel stays at her expense and travel, which he rejected on those particular times. He did come across as very uncooperative. I will say at certain times she seemed to want to try and embrace him into the fold a bit more with various hotel stays. When she was staying with Doria, she said, stay with us, we'll put you up here, there. Offered to finance some of these visits, but he was like, no, I want to get back to Mexico and do his own thing. So he comes across as somebody who very much prefers to have this sort of spirit of independence. And I think no matter what situation he'll put himself in, he would find a way to sort of wriggle himself out, because he wants to feel totally sort of in control and this independent and owner of various narratives. And she seems to get that from him, I'm afraid. And it's often said about this author that he's meticulous, that he's forensic, leaves no stone unturned. And, I understand that it's been meticulously compiled, if you want to put it that way, but I don't find it to be a forensic analysis in any way. I don't find every stone not to be unturned. It's just a competent compendium. For example, this episode, this rumour of her chucking a cup of tea in the air, which I think is rather silly. I can't remember where it came from, but he alludes to this. He just says, according to one report, Meghan allegedly threw a cup of tea into the air. Well, that's just giving us, you're just airing some tabloid rumour. You haven't investigated it. Why mention it if you don't know it as a matter of fact? Or what, I find that kind of thing just lazy. So in summary, I agree with all the major reviews out there in that it is a competent read. It'll entertain some of you. I don't think it'll make many of you laugh out loud. I was hoping for a bit more commentary, to be honest. And it's a useful compendium, but was it particularly insightful? I didn't find it to be. Was it explosive? Absolutely not. But what I don't take away from it, and what I do give it credit for, is that it leaves that nasty aftertaste in the mouth when you read page after page after page after page of what led to what, and the way that it illustrates how they operate, how they operate, and their modus operandi, as I said, It illustrates the way they fictionalize and marginalize and isolate and damage. It certainly does that. I won't take that away from it. And yes, everything they do, it leaves a bitter aftertaste, doesn't it? Funny taste, a funny smell lingering in the air. Just leaves you uncomfortable. And that's what you know. That is the overall effect of this book, this sort of fug of something sinister, you know, by the pricking of my thumbs, that sort of thing. So in that respect, it is successful. Well, my fruit crumbles. I've got to hop, skip and jump over. I tried to wear it for the finale, but still ain't working. I'll catch up with you soon. Be good and stay royal.